pleasure to introduce Gabby Kawakis, who will now be MC for this service.
Brigadier Keith Rossi, Lieutenant Colonel Mark Gainsford, Honourable Petro Giorgio, Padre, Your Reverence, honoured guests, ladies and gentlemen. Our gathering today to honour this exceptional gentleman is historic and essential. The sacrifice made by our service personnel must never be forgotten. The freedom we enjoy in this country today came at a very high price, and that price was paid and is still being paid by our service personnel. As Australian Assyrians, we have a special obligation to ensure the sacrifice is never forgotten. Those of us from Assyrian ancestry are now becoming aware of the strong link between our very survival and this Australian serviceman. We Assyrians owe a great deal to this wonderful country, this great nation that breeds such men as Stanley George Savage. During the summer of 1918, in the killing fields of Persia, this righteous young Australian decided on his own initiative to defend Assyrian refugees, fighting day after day, week after week, keeping the enemy at bay as best he could until the refugees reached safety. He held on to defensive positions until the last possible moment, when almost surrounded, before extracting his command only to repeat the process. By doing this, he gave the refugees, those that were able, sufficient time to escape. He sent riders forward to inform the British of the situation. Food and medicine was prepared for them prior to their arrival. He cared for the helpless as best he could. He used himself as a buffer between the Turkish army and the Assyrian refugees, and offered himself as a target so the refugees could be spared. It's difficult to describe in words the reality of what he accomplished or the horrors that he witnessed. For me personally, the situation is best described by the General's own words. For the refugees that were left behind, he says, to have drawn our revolvers and shot them would have been humane, knowing full well how cruelly they would be treated by the foe. He was ready to sacrifice himself and his entire command to save the refugees. He used himself as a shield between them and the Turks. In his own words, he says, the Turkish commander would concentrate his efforts on wiping us out before turning the energies of his men on the unfortunate people. At the beginning of the war, the Assyrians numbered more than 800,000. By 1918, they were reduced by massacre to 80,000. The final count of survivors at the end of the war numbered 48,000. From 800,000 to 48,000 in 4 years. Today, I am privileged to be standing before the General and his family, and am pleased to inform them from those 48,000 survivors, their descendants today have increased close to the original number of 800,000. By the grace of God, it is because of this man's efforts at a critical time in our people's history that we as their descendants are able to stand here today. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I introduce Father Kenneth Lazar.
Let us all pray. In the name of the Holy Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, our loving Creator, ever so present in your Son, our Lord and Saviour Jesus Christ. We confess, worship, and praise the awesome strength of your glorious Trinity, who reigns in heaven and on earth. Holy Father, we thank you for our gathering today in remembrance of our Australian brother, Lieutenant General Sir Stanley Savage, who has found rest in your everlasting peace. truly believe that this brave man was your awesome and your answer to the outcry of our Assyrian people at a crucial time in their lives, when they were facing total destruction because they held on to the holy and life-giving name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Almighty Father, we thank you for this blessed country of Australia, which offered such a man who risked all for the sake of his fellow men, reflecting the true caring spirit of Australia and Australians. Hear, O Lord, the prayer of your unworthy servants. We beseech you, Heavenly Father, and ask from the depth of your grace and mercies on behalf of our brother Sir Savige, who has departed from amongst us, that you call and raise him at your right hand, and include his name in the book of life. Count him amongst your chosen, and include him in the multitude of those who glorify you, along with all the righteous and justified who are well pleasing before you and walk according to your will. Bless, O Father, the family of Sir Savige in your loving kindness, and keep them from all harm in the overflowing abundance of your mercy. Protect their lives beneath the wings of the care of your love. Bestow, O Father, your peace and tranquility across the four corners of the world. Grant peace to the church and the nation. Scatter the divided people who desire to harm, that we may lead a calm and peaceful life in total control and prosperity. We thank you and love you, our Father, asking all these in the precious and majestic and life-giving name of our Lord Jesus Christ, forever. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, representing the Prime Minister, the Honourable Pedro Giorgio.
Ladies and gentlemen, members of the family, this is a very important occasion in the history of the Syrian community and also in the history of Australia. Anyone that reads any of General Savage's achievements, both in the First and the Second World War, can only be impressed by his leadership capacities and the fact that he was a very difficult man to say no to. It's very good being here today, and the Prime Minister sends his regards and he'll be writing to the Guardian. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, Brigadier Keith Rossi. Thank you, Gabby, distinguished guests, members of the Syrian community. Just a few words about Stan Savage. He lies under that tombstone, and I see it's emblazoned with the badge of legacy, which was an important part of Stan's life. I call him Stan familiarly because I served under him. He was a brigadier and I was a sergeant. There's a lot of difference. This remarkable man, born in Gippsland, had to leave school at the age of 12, a very limited education, but taught himself. He became a Boy Scout just when that movement was starting in the early 1900s. He became a very good scout, and what he learnt in that wonderful organisation is what guided him throughout his life. He was also a very good Methodist, went to church regularly and learnt a lot there. When war broke out in 1914, his family were very opposed to him enlisting in the armed services, and he agonised about it for a long time. He was about to get married. But in the end he decided he had to go, and early in 1915 he enlisted and was put in the 24th Battalion. He was made a corporal very quickly. By the time they arrived in Egypt, he'd been promoted to sergeant, and he went to Gallipoli and fought in Gallipoli as a sergeant, and he was commissioned a lieutenant in November 1915 at Gallipoli.
Of course, a few months later, after Gallipoli, they went to France, and where he got a military cross and was mentioned in dispatches. Still fighting with his blunt bandages, as they used to call it, the 24th Battalion. In 1918, after Russia had withdrawn from the war, this caused the opening of the road and rail from Turkey, who were our enemies at that time, to India. And it was left to the Armenians and the Assyrians to try to prevent the Germans getting through Turkey into the Indian subcontinent. Assistance was called for, and the military in their wisdom called on the colonial armies on the Western Front, there's the Canadians, Australians, New Zealanders and South Africans, to provide very experienced officers and sergeants to go and perhaps assist the Assyrians in the best way they could. Savige was chosen, and off he went as a captain with a team of other Australians and Canadians, etc. It was in July 1918, very close to the end of the war in Europe, when things got pretty tough in northern Mesopotamia and in Kurdistan. The Assyrian army and the Armenians were running short of supplies and money, and it was Savage's job to take those supplies forward to Urmia, and they were to meet the Assyrian army about 100 miles short of Urmia. Well, they were a bit late arriving, and Gabby has told you how Savage insisted on staying behind, and in the end, when the refugees came through from Urmia, protecting them. This was all the ideals that he had learnt as a Boy Scout. Anyway, he survived the war, and he stayed in the militia and the Home Defence Army between wars, and at the outbreak of World War II, he was a brigadier. And he was immediately appointed to command the 17th Brigade. That was the Victorian Brigade of the 6th Division, the 1st Division formed in World War II. And that's where I got to know Brigadier Stanley Savige. He fought in the Middle East, in the desert, as we call it. That was in North Africa, and then in Greece, and got back to Egypt and found that he was required to join the 7th Division and take his brigade up into Syria, where he fought in Syria. He was then brought back to Australia, made a Major General, fought in the Wow Salamoa campaign, commanding the 3rd Division, and then was made a Lieutenant General and was in charge of all the operations in New Guinea and Burgundy. Between the wars, he started Legacy, in Melbourne Legacy, to look after the widows and children of men killed in the war or who died as a result of the war. And that was his lifelong love, Melbourne Legacy. Under his influence, we soon had Sydney Legacy, and a Legacy in New Zealand, and Legacy in Brisbane. It gradually spread all over Australia. After World War II, he continued with Legacy, and right until his death, which was at a very young age of 64. He died in 1954 at the age of 64. And this fellow, who had started off as a young, uneducated man in Gippsland, his first job was a striker for the local blacksmith, made him pretty strong, and to finish up as Lieutenant General Sir Stanley Savige. What a wonderful achievement, and what he did for not only for the Assyrians, but all of his life in looking after not only soldiers and veterans of the wars, but their widows and children. As they say, used to say in Legacy, Stanley Savage, there goes a man, and his remains lie there today. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Brigadier Keith Rossi, Lieutenant Colonel Gainsworth, Honourable Member of Federal Parliament for Georgia, Padre, Your Reverence, members of Sir Savage's family, Gabby Garrigus, community representative, honoured guests, ladies and gentlemen. I'm truly privileged and honoured on behalf of the Victorian Assyrian community to show and express my utmost thanks and appreciation to the Australians who were part of a young nation which committed its resources and its people to fight against oppression and freedom of mankind. This is a unique experience for me, as I'm sure it is for most of you. For the first time, we were able to stand in public to draw attention to the misfortune and deliberate miscarriage of any form of justice to the Assyrian and the Syrian nation. It is also unique in the sense that we are able to recognize the assistance of a foreign force in delivering a nation from total genocide. Presently, I have mixed emotions of joy, desperation, and of sadness. As an Australian, I'm proud and in awe of individuals such as Lieutenant General Sir Stanley Savige and his forces. Their gallantry and devotion shone through in July and August 1918, as they, against all odds, steadfastly delivered some 70,000 refugees to safety between Sayinkala and Tekantapa. I truly urge you to take a short journey with me and try to imagine the condition they were to endure, given that these people were well trained and most probably well armed and equipped. But the reality was that they weren't only fighting the enemy of some hundreds strong, but also their movement would have been somewhat handicapped by the harshness of the countryside and the lack of non-existence of communication due to language barriers, and the lack of supplies and ill health of both the Syrian refugees and the troops. Given the negative factors, these individuals risked everything to fulfill their objectives. This shows how strong the resolve was. And as a nation, we are grateful for it, and we do salute them. As an Assyrian who has some link to the refugees, I am bewildered as to why it is that these events reoccurred, and we, as a stateless nation, are right in the midst of it. All this anguish. Perhaps there are some links between the fact that by the virtue of our birthright, we have and continue to suffer the consequences which we have no control over. My heart is full of sorrow for the people that have endured so much, simply because they were different and an easy target. If I might quote Sir Stanley, I know, Gabby, you mentioned that as well, but I'll do it. If I might quote Sir Stanley, so we dismounted and placed 2 or 3 women or children upon our horses, abandoning hundreds to their fate. Cruel as this was absolutely essential, so with heavy hearts and big lumps in our throats, we were forced to turn a deaf ear to the pleading of these poor unfortunates who called upon us to save them. To have drawn our revolvers and shot them would have been humane, knowing full well how cruelly they would have been treated by the foe behind. Yes, my friend, the voices of the poor and helpless are alive today. The cry of the children searching for their parents.
the anguish of a father seeking his daughter, desperation of a brother or a sister looking for his or her sibling. These are the voices which to this day have and will continue to echo in my ears and yours alike. And the two clear messages that were expressed are of the gratitude and thanks to those that had helped, including Sir Stanley Savige and his troops. However, the more pressing message of all is the one which calls every one of us to fulfill our responsibilities toward mankind. And we must ask ourselves, what is it we are doing in order to fulfill this responsibility? I as an individual have a responsibility. You as a government and the power players have responsibility. And we as a nation have responsibility so that these events do not occur. Just as Sir Stanley, with the ultimate sacrifice, made it his responsibility to stop and assist the Assyrians. If we fail to learn from our past and take stock of our results, then all that has gone before us, including the sacrifices, hardship, loss of lives, destruction, can be seen as a fatal passing of time. Lieutenant Sir Stanley Savige, as an individual, I'm grateful for your endeavours and self-sacrifice in delivering the Assyrians from an otherwise inevitable massacre. As a community, we are indebted to you for your belief in assisting the less fortunate. As a nation, as an Australian, we are proud of your dedication to the task at hand and your faith in human kindness. In closing, let us all recognise that this is the unfortunate occurrence of history, and let us take heart from the self-sacrifice of individuals. But at the same time, let us recognise the existence of such forces as Sir Stanley's. Together we can aim and do our utmost to prevent the repeat of history, lest we forget. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, representing the Assyrian and Arts and Literature Foundation, Dr. Yaakov Martin Sabat.
Brigadier Chief Rossi, Lieutenant Colonel Gainsford, Honorable Member of Parliament, Petro Rossi, Padre, Your Reverence, Reverend Lazar, Gabby, honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen. Today is a great day in Australian Assyrian history. Today, Assyrian Australian have chance to pay tribute to an honorable man, the late Lieutenant General Stanley Savage, who assumed a mission to help Assyrians at one of their most difficult times. It is true, those refugees he helped were Assyrian, and some of them were our relatives. Today we are here. In August 1918, in Urmia, when defenseless Assyrians were under Turks' attack, then Captain Stanley Savage was trying to save as many Assyrians refugees as possible. Under Turks' aggression, Assyrians were trying to escape from their homes and were seeking refuge. The story of this involvement is marvelous. Captain Savage was in Persia, but not specifically for the mission to help Assyrian refugees. However, his duty was to supply Assyrian army with some weapons for their defense against aggressive Turks. Based on the event at that time, his group had chance, in fact, were ordered to return without any involvement, but he insisted to stay and waited patiently. And it happened that he participated in saving them when they were defenseless and seeking refuge. There is no doubt late General Stanley Savige was a great believer in God, a man of principles, and a courageous soldier. But he did not have any responsibility to interact and put his own and his men's life in danger to hell. So what was his motive for the interaction? Was it his humanitarian feelings, or it was a special command from God? Whatever his motive was, he was helping and saving people who were a part of remainders of Assyria, the great empire which brought the light of civilization to the God's people thousands of years ago. And the same very people were the flickering light of Christianity in Middle East for centuries. Therefore, in his effort, he was indeed trying to save and defend human dignity, principles, and values, which were challenged and attacked in Middle East. We believe he acted according to God's will. At that time, when powerful governments in the region decided to expand their treaties through victimizing innocent Christians and committing systematic massive crimes. General Stanley Savige, we remember and respect you because you saved and helped innocent people who were victimized for their identity and were victimized for keeping Christianity so dearly in their hearts. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, just as a last speaker, the Assyrian youth organisations wanted to be a part of this and wanted to share it with us. So we've got Mr. Christopher Georges who just to give us a short briefing.
Brigadier Keith Rossi, Lieutenant Colonel Gainsford, Honourable Member of Parliament Peter Giorgio, Padre, Your Reverence, honoured guests, ladies and gentlemen. Stanley Savige was a unique man. From how he persisted to help the Assyrians, to the way he led his men into battle, through exhausting endeavours weeks on end. When I hear the name Stanley Savige, the words sacrifice, pride and honour come to mind, for his efforts in aiding the Assyrians were more than remarkable, efforts of which will never be forgotten. As I stand here, I see many different faces, all of which have gathered here today for one sole purpose, to commemorate and honour what a great man Stanley Savige was. The message is unfolding, and the Assyrian youth are ever more becoming aware of what the likes of Lieutenant General Stanley Savige and our veterans have done for our country and people, allowing us to have a more meaningful depth to the word humanity. Living in such a multicultural society, it is important for the youth to grow up understanding their heritage and what it took for their existence here today, and why we will so proudly recite the ode for those soldiers fallen in past battles and endeavours. In their remembrance, our thanks to all the soldiers who fought for our salvation, and what it took for our race to have survived and led to us being here today. The devotion, courage and sacrifice Lieutenant General Stanley Savige and our veterans showed during the wars have provided us with the opportunity to to be educated, and have the freedom to choose our own destiny. These men, these soldiers, our veterans, whether Assyrian or Australian, are the reasons we are here today. And with great pride and honour, I reflect, recognise and appreciate what extraordinary men our veterans were. Our future lies within the hands of the youth, and it is important for them to know, like us all here today, that we've gathered to show our thanks and commemoration to all the soldiers who laid down their lives to safeguard us with life. It is essential for all of Australia's youth to learn about important events in history like this, where over 80 years ago, a man by the name of Stanley Savige made a stand for what he believed was right. A belief that perhaps without it, many of us may not be here today. So as I conclude, I leave with you this quote: "If your children can read or write, thank a teacher. If your children can read or write English, thank a soldier." Their legacy beholds with us forevermore, and generations to come will never forget what these brave men have done for us all. Thank you.
Next gentleman representing the family Savige, Mr. John Savige.
Civilian Service Association, Brigadier Keith Rossi, Lieutenant Colonel Gainsford, the Honourable Member of Parliament Petro Giorgio, Your Reverence, Grace, distinguished guests, Syrian visitors, Savage family members, ladies and gentlemen. Debbie, on behalf of the Savage family, thanks to you and the Assyrian Levies Association for organising this unique conference. He was always known as the Soldier General. I'm sure we want these military men sure back in his day he would have been penning some tea and sent to you. We really need to read his book, Storky's Forlorn Hope, to get a grasp of what happened in saving 50,000 Syrians at Tepi, Persia in July 1918. It was a tremendous act of bravery and humanitarianism. I'm sure Uncle Stan would be incensed at learning of your plight in Iraq today, and would want me to wish all the Syrians the very best for their future and your future development. What can I tell you about this great man in a couple of minutes? The boy from the bush that made it. Leaves school at age 12, blacksmith striker, coal miner. Scoutmaster, studies for the ministry, joins World War I. Serves at Gallipoli, and according to his book, The Right Man for the Right Job, he was last off at Gallipoli. Gets a field commission to the rank of captain, selected to the elite Dunster Force in saving Syrians. Successful businessman, representing the RSL Wollongong at Geelong. One of the co-founders of Legacy and its original driving and financial force. Joins the militia and before World War I rises to the rank of brigadier. During all this, he was awarded Military Cross and the DSO. He joins World War II with a service number VX13. Rises to the rank of Major General, and again, according to Captain Keating, was one of the most senior officers at the end of the war. Appointed coordinator of the demobilisation after the war, becomes a Knight of the Realm with the KPE, and attends the Queen's coronation. Not too bad a CV for a boy. My views about him have changed over the years, from my boyhood adulation to the realisation of his brave humanitarian acts. Life with him in the big old house down at Summers, fishing, shooting, hunting, swimming, was boys' own annual stuff. The big dinners and the cocktail parties, it was always my job to hand out the savouries and cook and slaved all day to prepare, collect the glasses and empty the ashtrays. And he used to make me stand in front of the people and ruffle my head and he'd say to them that I was his Batman. So if I was his Batman, he was my mentor and my general. Now, 70 years on, I look upon him as one of this country's great humanitarians. The Syrian Rescue, Legacy, the great organisation it is today, the demobilisation. Not an academic or professional soldier, but to the troops, he was the soldiers' general. In hindsight, what a brilliant decision by the government of the day to appoint him coordinator of demobilisation. Although a sick man, he took up the appointment to his final order of the war. Again, I quote from Captain Keating's book. I am determined, whatever the time it takes to cover our demobilisation, it will be devoted to providing facilities to help you obtain the best possible start in civilian life. That is a service I owe you. Just let me say that again. That is a service I owe you. Plans in hand to provide every facility for education, technical training and associated studies to assist you to obtain better jobs and prospects than you can before. Order of the day, 4 rings. Over the years I've met many soldiers and I've heard many stories. Far too many to repeat here this morning, but one I'd like to just tell you about, which I think epitomises just exactly what this man was and what he meant. I started my life as a trainee mechanical draftsman in a medium-sized engineering firm, and the chief mechanical engineer was ex-army. In about my 3rd year of the course, he got to know me a little better and he told me his General Savige story. Years before the war, 1939, 1940, he was a 17, 18-year-old knockabout kid driving trucks, taxis, drinking, smoking, swearing, and going nowhere fast in his life. He decides, with the permission of his parents, to join the army. He thought this war caper sounded a lot of fun, and if you could go the distance, there was longevity in the employment. Plus, wages were good. Well, he went the distance, through the desert, and through the jungles of New Guinea and Bougainville. During the course of his discharge, he has to attend several lectures by the demobilisation. He sits there, doesn't pay much attention to them. The leaflets handed out to him he didn't bother to read, he tossed them in his bag, heads back to Melbourne, with truck driving, drinking, smoking, and getting on with his life, and trying to forget forget the 5 years that were robbed out of him. Fortunately, his father found the literature, read it, and talked him into doing some of the early courses. He finally went on to do and complete mechanical engineering degree at Melbourne University. And for the rest of his life was always grateful to the Soldiers General for giving him this opportunity. In conclusion, I agree completely with Russell in his biography. The old soldier standing out the front of St Paul's Cathedral at his funeral, and as the gun carriage goes by, it's heard to say, there goes the man, if ever there was. Thank you, Gavin. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Lieutenant Colonel Mark Ainsworth.
Brigadier Rossi, the Honourable Petro Giorgio, Reverend Fathers, members of the Assyrian community, members of the Savage family, honoured guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed my privilege to be here this morning as we honour and commemorate the life and achievements of Lieutenant General Sir Stanley Savage. That he is so admired and revered by the Assyrian community, the way that he stood by your people and covered their evacuation gives an indication of the calibre of the man. He embodied all of the qualities of a brave and resourceful soldier at a very difficult and critical time. Indeed, just hearing the stories of how a young boy left home, led a life and a journey and an adventure through the Australian Army and beyond that, and achieved such remarkable feats is something that can only inspire us all. To be revered as the Soldiers General, there is no higher accolade that you can be given as a member of the Australian Army. That he soldiered on from that action to become an Army Commander and General Officer in World War II tells us of how exceptional a man he was. He is an exemplar of the Australian Army because he displayed in his life outstanding character and courage. For those of us that serve today, we can only hope that we can serve to some extent in the same manner in which he did. His work as the founder of Legacy has shown his compassion for the families of fallen comrades. His untimely death at the age of only 64, due no doubt to his arduous and stressful life, demonstrates his strong sense of duty and sacrifice. It is very gratifying to see that he is today receiving the recognition he has long willed by holding this commemoration service today. I'm sure his family is thrilled that the Moore Historical Society and Legacy will later unveil a statue of the General. Australians and Victorians ought to be especially proud of this wonderful soldier. I hope that being here this morning may help to heal the wounds and grief suffered by the Assyrian nation in the events of 1918. The Australian Army is a proud organisation. We are proud of the traditions and accomplishments of Lieutenant General Sir Stanley Savage. We hold him in the highest regard. We honour and salute him here this morning. Thank you.
Let's pray the prayer of commemoration. Almighty God, we thank you for those who did not count their lives dear to themselves, but laid them down for our sakes. We this day commemorate the memory of Sir Stanley George Savage, Lieutenant General of the Australian Army. May the memory of his devotion and sacrifice always be an example to us, that we may live as faithful servants of the Lord Christ Jesus, who died for our eternal salvation. We look forward with thanksgiving to that time when we will join with all who have died in the faith in the joy of your eternal kingdom, where sorrow and pain are no more, and where every tear will be wiped away through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. We should now have the laying of wreaths. Roseanne.
They shall grow not old, as we the left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. Lest we forget.
Party, up to you. Check. General salute. Sam, arms. Up to you. Check.
Lieutenant Colonel Gainsford, Honourable Member of Parliament, Metro Georgia, Cadre, members of the Savage family and the Syrian community, honourable guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to convey the gratitude and blessings of His Grace, Marmil Isaiah, Bishop of the Assyrian Church of the East in Australia and New Zealand. Due to pressing matters, His Grace was regrettably unable to attend this memorable ceremony that honours Lieutenant General Sir Savage. His Grace believes that the contact with Sir Savage was not by coincidence or chance, but an act of providence. Through this courageous man, we Australian Assyrians have found a precious link to Australia. His Grace Marmelis is very appreciative of Mr. Gabby Pilatus and his efforts for raising awareness and honouring such military men who have served our people with exceptional dedication. God bless you all, Sir Savage and his family, and God bless Australia. By grace, Bishop Marmelis.